for me, it's fun art. You know, if you get out of bed in the morning and you're in a not so good mood, and it's gray outside, and you look at his painting, I feel like this will wake me up.
Rick Garcia is an artist whose tropical surrealist paintings are some of the most celebrated images of the last quarter century. And his latest series of paintings has his artwork in the spotlight again. But to arrive at this new collection of work would take several decades, and a rebirth of sorts in the unlikeliest of places. Born in Miami, Rick's earliest paintings were cultured by a fascination with nature and a love of surrealist painting.
With surrealism, that was so fascinating about is how things would change, and then flowers and insects and birds and all these things. The nature has so much surreal information, I guess is the way to say it, because there's so many patterns. If you look at them closely on insects and bugs and animals and all, the patterns themselves become other things.
The 1980s saw Rick's artwork rise to national prominence on hit TV shows like Miami Vice, in magazines like Rolling Stone, and award ceremonies like the Grammys. Rick's impact on art and culture even led Absolut Vodka to name him one of the artists of the decade for the 1990s.
Things happen as you get more known and your work gets out there. It's a domino effect, and you just got to keep it going.
But after spending most of his life and career living and working in Miami, Rick decided it was time for a change, and in 1999 relocated to Santa Fe, New Mexico.
I felt I needed a change, a dramatic change, and for some reason Santa Fe, New Mexico was the only choice after thinking about where to move to.
Every time an artist in particular, even us, every time as we move, we find the different cultures, and that's also something, that brings something to what we do.
While in New Mexico, Rick was commissioned for new artwork, but all the while a growing interest in his Cuban heritage began to take hold.
What's interesting after 10 years later is that moving there got me closer to Cuba. What really attracted me the most was the nostalgic era that I don't know of. I wasn't in Cuba in the 40s and the 50s or early 60s. But there's some, when you look at pictures and you hear stories and you see films and so on, you have some sort of taste of what it must have been like.
This fascination in his roots would serve as the catalyst for both a change in style and a new series of paintings, aptly titled Cuba con leche, Spanish for Cuba with milk.
For some reason, I got focused on how Cubans ask for café con leche as a mantra. It's like you don't even know you're saying it, you're just ordering it. You've ordered it every day, probably 2 or 3 times a day. Moving to New Mexico, getting away from Miami, getting away from the way I used to work, the way I used to think, made me drop completely the way I used to paint. I dropped the surrealism, I dropped being so overly precise with the imagery. Cuban theme, the Cuban life is much more looser and fast and exciting and loud and colorful.
Over the next 2 years, Rick would paint over 24 Cuban-themed paintings, culminating in a trip to the land of his ancestors in the fall of 2009.
I was basically absorbing as much as I could for these paintings. I tried to bring back something from that island for these paintings. And there's such a wealth of architecture and music and art there that's astounding.
At the end of 2009, Rick returned to Miami with his new series and a newfound understanding of himself and his artwork.
Again, there's another painting which is a mix of different images I found somewhere. This came from some ad of some sort, this guy here, and I wanted to use it in some other piece, and I figured he'd be perfect right here looking at this girl.
I feel a certain sense of romance in his painting as well. So in general, I would look at this as, an upbeat kind of art with a touch of romance and reminding people who know Cuba, like I said, of the older days.
It has a lot of animals, he has a lot of fruits. The words, are pretty much, on the culture itself.
There is something in his painting, there's happiness coming along with that.
You see his maturing, what I see is more like he's now kind of being more himself. You can see he's much more solid now. It's like, he found his own path as an artist. and he made the connection, you know, can we say, when the artist really kind of find his own identity in what he does. And I think this is pretty much what it is right now.
With these paintings with Cuba con leche, it's absolutely zero political. I don't get into any politics. I don't try to express anything political. I use only elements of Cuba, the past. Nothing, there's no statement in any of these things. People have tried to look at these images, trying to pick out, does this mean this or that? I said, no, it's just colors, it's just images, it's just putting stuff from the past together into a pop style, and that's it, making something pretty and just give recognition to an island that has an amazing history.
You can find out more about artist Rick Garcia at rickgarcia.com.
The preceding program was a production of WLRN Public Television.